Hello everyone watching today's video. The story begins on a seemingly peaceful morning, but then everything changes when Hoai Ca discovers that Tony has strange signs that make him uncomfortable all night. Unsure of the cause, the whole family is both worried and anxious. After discussing, Mr. Hung appeared and, together with Hoai Ca, took Tony to the provincial hospital to find answers. What the doctor said surprised everyone. And then, from here, a journey full of love and care begins, with a desire to help Tony recover quickly. Part 1, when the itch became Hoai Ca's worry. Early morning in the quiet countryside, the sound of roosters crowing echoed throughout the neighborhood. The mist still lingered on the roof. Hoai Ca carried a basin of boiling water into the room, intending to wash Tony's face like every day. But today, her heart was heavy. Tony was still sleeping, or rather, was in a fitful sleep after a night of restless itching. Tiny red spots had appeared on the boy's skin. At first, Hoai Ca thought it was probably just a mild allergy, but her anxiety increased when she remembered last night. Tony kept turning over, groaning softly, his tiny hand scratching until his skin was scratched. She briefly thought of chickenpox, but Tony had had it last year. The doctor said it was only contracted once. The originally peaceful morning air was now replaced by repeated questions in Hoai Ca's head. What exactly is wrong with my child? Is it serious? In the countryside, the commune health station can only provide first aid, while complicated cases must be taken to the district or provincial hospital. But that means having to travel far, being expensive and taking a whole day. Behind that worry is great love. Hoai Ca had gone through a difficult time, wandering around before having this temporary roof. Last year, when Tony had chickenpox, Hung, a kind neighbor, helped take him to the hospital. This time, she hesitated. Should I call Hung again? He just got sick. I think any mother has been in this situation, standing at the crossroads of worry, love, and harsh reality. You want your child to get well soon, but you have to consider the route, the cost, and the help from others. Hoai Ca's story is not just an itch. It opens up a whole journey, from the initial doubts, the decision to take your child to the doctor, to the moment of receiving the diagnosis. And it all started that morning, when a pot of boiling water and a mother's worried eyes became the milestone for the whole family to enter an unforgettable day. Part 2. Background and the early days of Tony's itching. In the early days, Tony's itching appeared quietly, not attracting much attention. At that time, there were only a few small red spots, and Tony was still playing normally. Hoai Ca thought simply, it was probably due to the hot weather, and his skin was still young and sensitive. But as each day passed, the number of spots increased, the red color became darker, and the itching made Tony restless and uncomfortable, especially at night. In the original story, Hoai Ca recounted, a week had passed, the situation did not improve, even worse. At first, everyone guessed the illness. Some said it was due to being bitten while going to the forest, others thought it was due to washing clothes together, or a food allergy. In the countryside, folk experience is often the first doctor. But the problem is, no one is sure of the real cause. I imagined Tony in a small house, playing and scratching. The child did not understand why his body betrayed him, and could only go to his mother for help. For children, itching is not just a feeling on the skin. It is something that takes away sleep, joy, and even the peace of a day. Emotionally, Hoai Ca is caught between two pressures, worrying about her child's health and the fear of medical expenses. Not everyone knows that for those who do not have a household registration or health insurance, every time they go to the hospital, they have to calculate every penny. This story makes me think of a paradox. Skin diseases, especially in children, are often taken lightly. People think it's just itching, apply a little medicine and it will go away. But in reality, if the cause is parasites or infections, if left for too long, it can spread widely, even causing complications. And at this moment, Hoai Ca begins to realize she cannot just wait. Even though she does not know exactly what the disease is, a week has passed, too long for a child to endure. This is the moment when love forces the mother to act, despite the difficulties ahead. Part 3. Obvious symptoms and initial misunderstandings. Tony's itching entered its second week, but now it was no longer just a few scattered red spots. They spread into patches, raised bumps, and tiny water droplets appeared. Every time he itched, Tony curled up, scratching his tiny hands until they were red and sore. Hoai Ca tried to stop many times, but just a few seconds later, Tony unconsciously scratched again. In the video narration, Hoai Ca mentioned people's predictions. Some thought it was a recurrence of chickenpox, some guessed it was due to being in the forest, others thought it was due to washing clothes together. In the countryside, these diagnoses often came from personal experience or things they had seen or heard. But the problem was, no one dared to confirm for sure. What worried Hoai Ca the most was chickenpox. Last year, Tony had contracted the disease, and at a time when the family was struggling to build a house. The doctor at that time said that chickenpox only happened once, so she was suspicious. But when I saw the new water droplets on my child's skin, fear still crept into my heart. I think this is a very real feeling for many parents in areas with poor medical conditions. They don't have a doctor to ask, nor can they turn on their phones and get accurate answers from reliable sources. Instead, they rely on memories and advice from neighbors, sometimes right, sometimes delaying things. Meanwhile, for a child, every day of enduring the itch is a day of eroding health and spirit. The itch doesn't cause fever, doesn't make the child lethargic like a serious illness, but it smolders and takes away sleep, makes the child irritable, and refuses to eat. It is a silent enemy that many people often underestimate. Hoai Ca began to realize that, whatever the cause, a week was long enough for her to take Tony to the doctor. This wasn't just about treating a skin disease. It was also about protecting her child from the risk of the disease spreading and infecting others. Deep down, she knew, the longer she waited, the more her child would suffer. That decision was about to open a new turning point in the story, the journey to find answers from the doctor instead of vague predictions. Part 4. Deciding to go to the doctor and the hesitant preparation. After more than a week of observing and listening to all kinds of advice, Hoai Ca knew she couldn't wait any longer. Tony needed to be examined by a real doctor. This seemingly simple decision, in the city, might just be taking her child to a clinic near her house, but in Hoai Ca's countryside, it was a big problem. In the video, Hoai Ca said that her house was more than 20 kilometers from the district hospital. The road was bumpy in many places. To get there, she needed a motorbike, and it was best to have someone drive her because she had to hold her child. A bus was not convenient, because Tony would have to come into contact with many people, a risk if her child's illness was contagious. The next problem was money. Hoai Ca didn't have health insurance, so every time she went to the doctor, she paid for everything out of her own pocket. Not only the examination fee, medicine, but also gas and food along the way. For many people, this number is insignificant, but for a family that has just built a small house, every expense must be carefully considered. She also thought of Hung, the person who helped last time. He had just recovered from an illness. Should she bother him? But when she saw Tony scratching until he bled, Hoai Ca knew. At this time, shyness had to give way to concern for his child's health. I think this is a very remarkable point. Parents' love often overcomes personal hesitation. When their children need it, they are willing to borrow, ask for help, even trade their day's work. And in the countryside, help from neighbors and acquaintances is a lifeline in times of emergency. Finally, Hoai Ca picked up the phone and called Hung. Her voice was both apologetic and requesting. He did not hesitate, just said, "Get ready, I'll come pick you up later." Hearing that, she felt relieved, but also a little choked up, grateful that someone was willing to help, and also sad because of her situation of having to rely on others. That morning, Hoai Ca prepared things for Tony: a bottle of water, a few clean towels, a change of thin clothes, and a small bag of papers. She carried her child out to the yard, waiting for the sound of Hung's motorbike. In the early morning sunlight, Tony rubbed his sleepy eyes, not knowing that today would be a long day, starting his journey to find answers to the itchy spots that had haunted him for the past 2 weeks. Part 5. The journey to the hospital and emotions along the way. The sound of Hung's motorbike echoed from the end of the alley, blending with the crowing of roosters and the barking of dogs. Hoai Ca carried Tony out, her arms tightly holding the child as if afraid that the boy would fall among the potholes and bumpy curves ahead. Hung nodded, didn't say much, just reached out to help the mother and child onto the motorbike. The road to the district hospital was more than 20 kilometers long, but for them, it was not just a physical distance. Each stretch of road was a step further from a safe zone, where Hoai Ca was familiar with the vague advice of neighbors, closer to a clear medical answer. Along the way, the early morning wind blew painfully on her face. Tony sat nestled in his mother's lap, occasionally wiggling because of the itch. Hoai Ca gently held her child's hands, her heart filled with mixed feelings. Fear if the doctor said the illness was serious, worry about the cost, but also hope that this was just a mild illness and could be cured completely. I think this moment shows a special aspect of the journey of raising a child. Many times, the journey to the hospital is the longest time for parents to face their fears. There is no work to distract them, no one else to talk to, only the sound of cars, the sound of wind and unanswered questions. Through the green rice fields, over the creaking wooden bridge, the familiar image of the countryside seems to ease the tension. But every time Tony scratches again, Hoai Ca is startled, looks down at her child and sighs. And Hung sometimes looks back, reassuring, "When we get there, we can rest assured." Those words are like a spiritual support, even though neither of them knows what will happen next. When the signed District General Hospital appears at the end of the road, Hoai Ca feels like she has just finished climbing a mountain. In front is a wide gate. Inside, a long rows of plastic chairs and the loudspeaker calling out the patient's name echoes. She squeezed Tony's hand, took a deep breath, ready to embark on the next phase of her journey, facing the truth about the mysterious illness that had kept her son awake for the past 2 weeks. Part 6. The moment of waiting and meeting the doctor. Passing through the hospital gate, the familiar smell of antiseptic filled her nose. Tony clung tightly to her mother's neck, his eyes wide open as he looked at the long line of patients waiting. Hoai Ca walked to the reception desk, handed over her papers and received the examination form. The medical staff instructed, "Sit down and wait for your turn." The row of green plastic chairs was already full of people, each with a different look of anxiety. Next to them were the sounds of children crying, adults chatting softly, mixed with the loudspeaker reading names. Hoai Ca sat down, placed Tony in her lap, gently coaxed her child, and paid attention to each beep calling the number. Each time the loudspeaker rang, her heart beat faster, but then slowed down when it wasn't her name. During the waiting time, Hoai Ca had the opportunity to observe. There were children coughing, having high fevers, some sitting holding their stomachs, their faces pale. She wondered, was Tony's illness that serious? Or would it only take a few bottles of ointment to cure it? Hope and fear intertwined, making each minute feel like an hour. When Tony's name rang out from the loudspeaker, Hoai Ca carried her child and quickly walked into the examination room. The doctor, a middle-aged man wearing glasses, signaled to put Tony on a chair. He asked for a medical history, listening to Hoai Ca recount from the first red spots to the current condition. Then, the doctor carefully observed the rash area, using a light to examine each spot. He nodded, wrote a few lines in the notebook, then asked, "Is there anyone else in the family who has this itch?" This question startled Hoai Ca because she remembered that she had recently had some strange spots on her hands, but she had ignored them because she was busy. I think this moment was a very strong emotional transition, from vagueness to a clear suspicion that this could be an infectious disease, not just Tony's. The seconds waiting for the doctor's conclusion were like standing in front of a door that was about to open. You both wanted to open it quickly and were afraid of what you saw. Finally, the doctor looked up and said slowly, "You have scabies. This is a disease caused by tiny parasites, which can be transmitted through close contact or sharing things." The sentence fell like a stone, making Hoai Ca both relieved that it was not a serious illness, and worried because it was contagious and the treatment process would be long. Part 7. Doctor's explanation and treatment plan. After the diagnosis, the doctor pulled the chair closer, his voice low but clear. He explained, "Scabies is a disease caused by a microscopic parasite, the female scabies mite, burrowing under the skin to lay eggs. This activity causes tiny red spots, accompanied by intense itching, especially at night." Hoai Ca shuddered when she heard it. Before, she only thought scabies was an old disease in the countryside, but she never expected it to visit her own house. The doctor continued, "This disease is transmitted through skin-to-skin contact or sharing items such as clothes, blankets, and towels. If one person in the house has it, the risk of spreading it to other members is very high." The words immediately reminded Hoai Ca of the nights when Tony hugged his mother to sleep, the times when they used the same towel to wipe their faces. A chill ran down her spine, because she realized that she also had a few red spots and mild itching. The doctor opened the medicine cabinet and took out 2 types of medicine, a tube of topical medicine containing active ingredients to kill scabies, and a bottle of oral anti-inflammatory and anti-itch medicine. He gave detailed instructions. The topical medicine must be applied all over the body from the neck down, including areas where there are no rashes yet, and repeated after 7 days. The whole family needs to apply it at the same time, wash and dry all clothes and bedding in the sun. Otherwise, the disease will recur. I see that here, The important thing is not only the prescription, but also the parallel prevention plan. Many people with scabies only treat the main patient, forgetting to treat the environment and other members, leading to a cycle of reinfection. The doctor emphasized this to block the return of the parasite. Hoai Ca asked about the cost, and fortunately the total cost of the medicine was not too high. But the real price is the effort, from washing all the belongings, maintaining hygiene, to following the correct dosage on time. The doctor also advised, if the itching persists after 2 weeks, come back for a checkup immediately. Before leaving the room, Hoai Ca bowed her head in thanks. In her hand was now the medicine bag, small but containing hope to help Tony escape from his sleepless nights. In her heart, the worry was still there, but at least the confusion had disappeared. She knew what enemy she had to face and how to fight. Part 8. Returning home and starting the war against scabies. On the way home, the medicine bag in Hoai Ca's hand was like a ticket back to peace, but she knew this was just the beginning. The doctor had made it clear, treating scabies is not just about applying medicine, but also cleaning the entire living environment to prevent parasites from returning. As soon as she got home, Hoai Ca put Tony on the bed, then started rummaging through the blankets and clothes. She gathered everything in a corner, preparing to wash it with hot water and dry it under the hot sun. The clothes Tony often wore, the pillow he still hugged, and the winter blanket in the closet, all had to be dealt with. The work quickly turned into a small campaign. And Hung, even though he didn't live with her, stayed behind to help carry water and dry the clothes. Hoai Ca was breathing heavily while washing, sweat soaked her back, but her eyes still followed Tony, who was now sitting by the door, curiously looking at each item being hung out in the yard. When it came to applying the medicine, Hoai Ca did as she was told, applying it all over her body from the neck down, including the places that didn't have red spots. She also applied it to herself and asked Hung to help apply it to the hard-to-reach places. When the medicine was absorbed into her skin, Tony grimaced at the cold feeling, but didn't protest, perhaps because he was too tired of the persistent itch. I think this is a very beautiful emotional moment. Love is not only in taking the child to the doctor, but also in the meticulous daily actions, washing each blanket, drying each shirt, and timing the application of the medicine. It is the kind of love that is materialized into repetitive work, so patient that sometimes the person doing it doesn't even realize their own perseverance. At night, when Tony slept, Hoai Ca took the opportunity to wash the last load of clothes. Watching her child lie still more than usual, no longer scratching continuously, she saw a glimmer of hope. But she also understood that this battle would last at least a few weeks, and just a little bit of negligence, the enemy would return. In the quiet of the night, Hoai Ca whispered to himself, as long as my child is well, all the hardships will be worth it. And in the yard, under the moonlight, piles of white blankets are drying, as if to prove the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter that the whole family will overcome together. Part 9. Recovery days and the message after the story. In the following days, Hoai Ca's small house seemed to be in a state of hygiene alarm. Clothes and blankets were changed continuously. Every morning, the smell of fresh sunlight from the drying yard filled every corner of the house. Tony gradually scratched less, the red spots dried up, no longer oozing. Every time she saw her child sleeping soundly, not turning over because of the itch, Hoai Ca felt like a rock had been lifted from her heart. Applying medicine became a habit. Every night, she spread out a clean towel, placed Tony in the middle, and gently applied medicine to each area of skin. Even though her child was better, she persisted with the full course of treatment as the doctor had instructed, because she understood that if she gave up halfway, all her efforts would be in vain. A few days later, Hoai Ca realized that the red spots on her hands had also disappeared. The nagging itch was gone. She smiled, not only because she and her child were cured, but also because she learned a big lesson. In healthcare, correct diagnosis and timely action are more important than any guessing from folk experience. I think this story is not only a journey to cure a skin disease, but also a testament to the power of initiative and community spirit. Without Hung's help, Hoai Ca would have taken longer to find the cause. Without the determination to change hygiene habits, the disease would have returned. The message Hoai Ca drew, and also wants to send to anyone listening, is: don't take small symptoms lightly. A few itchy spots can be a sign of an infectious disease. See a doctor early. Modern medical knowledge helps save time, money, and avoid complications. Healthcare is a shared responsibility of the whole family. Diseases transmitted through contact require everyone to treat and maintain hygiene. When Tony trotted out into the yard, the innocent smile on the little boy's face seemed to erase the images of those sleepless nights. Hoai Ca stood watching, her eyes sparkling with joy, because the arduous journey had ended, and what remained deepest was the enduring love of a mother.